Welcome and welcome back to Morgue's Hauntings. If you are new, this is where we do everything horror, haunted, creepy, and cryptic. My name is Eric, and today I'm going to be reading some of your terrifying tales. This month, we've been doing a series where every day we read one of the scariest stories that you've sent in to us here on the channel. So far, we've had stories cause technical malfunctions, we've had stories cause Morgan and I to stay up late at night. So thank you all so much for the stories that you've sent in. If you want to send in a story, check the description below for the email where you can send it. Also check the description where you can find the link to our podcast episodes. We're going to be uploading a podcast every Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But without any more waiting, let's go ahead and dive into the stories. Hello there, I hope you and yours are well. I've enjoyed your content for the past year and was honestly hesitant to share my story, since I've only ever told 2 people, but yay for anonymity. True. For the story, please refer to me as Hayes for story purposes. For context, at the time of this story, I had lived in North Carolina for my entire life, in an area heavy with echoes of the Civil War battles that once happened here. I am a witch and have practiced since my mid-teens, despite it being particularly frowned upon where I grew up. Several members of my family, especially on one side, have varied gifts, but the majority of them refuse to admit it due to being involved with a church that condemns such things as blasphemy. I can see things, and sometimes I just know something with no explainable reason. For example, I'd make offhand comments to my mother about when hurricanes would hit months in advance, and had a 100% accuracy down to the week, occasionally even the day. I'd never remember making the comments, but my mother would suddenly begin prepping the house for a storm when the weather station hadn't reported anything. I always thought that it was her that had weird. I always thought it was her that had protected them due to not remembering saying anything until I was older and she explained. There have been a lot of other strange things in my life, about me, and about other people as well, around me. But I think it's time to tell you the scariest thing that I had ever experienced. I was around 23 and had just moved away from living with my single mother for the first time. We had always been close and open with each other, and I regularly traveled to see her, often staying rather late. It was one of those nights. I was driving down a back road heading to where I was staying. It wasn't a deserted area by any means. There were quite a few little houses and trailers around. At a specific corner, after I had rounded, I checked my rear view and saw something in the deep ditch off the side. Time seemed to stop for several moments as something crawled out of the ditch. It looked like a young boy, maybe 6 or 7, who was paper white, with short black hair and blacked out eyes. He didn't have any clothing on as far as I could tell, and he simply stood there, seemingly staring me down through the mirror. I've dealt with spirits and a number of things, but nothing has ever given me that feeling before or since. Something heavy and sad, the deepest sort of melancholy and fear. I faltered, blinked, and suddenly he was gone. But that feeling lingered. It lingered for years. When my mother would visit afterwards, she'd always make a swatting motion around my back and shoulders, as if shooing something away. I did cleansings weekly to keep my space livable. Finally, when I reached around 25, it left, right after an extremely difficult health scare that had resulted in problems that still haunt me over 10 years later. I still think my faltering was what caused the attachment. I've always had a "I'm the scariest thing here" mindset, and it's never failed me aside from this one time. I hope you found my story interesting. It's nice to finally tell it to someone. May you and yours be well. Hayes. Spirits aren't always just angry. They can come from a very low vibrational feeling, and it can be extremely intense and have energy that's lasted with you for years to come. That's happened to me. That's happened to a lot of people that I know. I hope you're doing well, and I hope your protections are doing well for you. Story 2. I've really only told my mom about this, and she had a dream as well of my dad, and we both really feel like he visited us. My dad passed away May 2021 after having seizures related to his heart problems. He passed away at 2:30 a.m., and it was incredibly hard for all of us as my mom was next to him when he couldn't come out of the fatal seizure and I didn't get to say goodbye. It always ate at me. I have 3 of my own dreams for him, and one my mom told me, and I'll tell them as they happened. Dream 1, early December of 2021. My parents went all out for Christmas since me and my siblings were little, and my dad loved the holidays. He would pull out the decorations after Thanksgiving dinner, and we would watch the traditional Christmas movies all month. Went to see the lights, and he always made sure Christmas music was always playing through the house on Christmas Eve night and throughout Christmas Day. After he passed and we were facing the first holidays without him, no one was in the holiday spirit. In fact, I remember my sister crying and saying, "I miss Dad, I want Dad here." And we kept saying it felt incomplete without him. He was the Christmas magic. But let's get to the dream. So when I dream, I don't smell anything, and when I touch people or things in my dreams, I can't feel what I'm touching. Also, the features of what I'm looking at are always creepily distorted. But in this dream, I walked through the door of my childhood home where he passed, and I stopped at the entrance. My dad, looking much healthier, was sitting in his recliner smiling at me, and my mom, my sister, my brother-in-law, and husband were smiling and waving me in. I immediately started sobbing happily and ran into my dad's arms. I could smell his cologne. I could feel his warmth and his hair as I laid my head on top of his and wrapped my arms around him. "You're here," I sobbed into him, and he just pulled back, gave me a smile. "Of course I'm here, why wouldn't I be?" And I just laughed and told him to shut up, and I just kept my arms around him. When I woke up, I could still smell his cologne. My husband doesn't wear that kind, and it even lingered for a little while. I definitely believe this is my dad's way of giving me a final chance at a proper goodbye, and it came just in time for the holidays. That's so nice. In June of 2023, I had the wonderful luck of being bit on my ear by a brown recluse fiddleback spider, and got to go to the ER just because it so happens that I'm allergic to them. Like swelled up, splotchy, vomiting, strained, breathing allergic reaction. The doctors told me in 2 to 3 weeks, my ear would probably be normal, as most people do heal from these bites just fine, or I could potentially be one where I have necrosis. Guess which one it was. But they also said that I could unlikely have a skin infection from the bite, and I would know if there's an infection within about 48 to 72 hours after the bite, because that's typically when an infection would set in. Around the 48-hour mark, my pain went from "I cannot put pressure to my ear" to "if one single hair touches my skin on that ear, I will sob hysterically." It was that painful. But I kept telling my husband I wanted to wait to go back to the hospital because the doctors were quite dismissive of my pain the first time around. I know that there's no cure or anti-venom for a brown recluse bite, but I just found it off-putting. Sometime before the 72-hour mark, the dream I had was with my dad. We were in his truck, my mom was driving, and he was in the passenger seat. My husband and I were in the back. Dad turned around to look at me and said, "You know you need to go to the hospital for that, right?" And I said, "Yes, Dad, I'm going." And he said, "Good, go on, take this seriously," and turned back around, and the dream ended. I made my husband take me to the hospital that following morning. I had cellulitis, a skin infection in the deep layers of the skin. I had to take steroids and antibiotics for 10 days, but they didn't work at all, and I couldn't stand any amount of pressure to my ear at all. After 10 days, I was put on new antibiotics, my steroids were upped, and luckily the infection was cured. In its entirety, it was just under a month of this situation. If I had waited, my cellulitis had the potential to spread to other areas of my body, and things could have gotten really bad. I think my dad popped in to tell me to stop waiting and get looked at. He took health seriously, and no matter how small the pain, he always insisted we get it looked at. Dream 3, my dad coddles my mom. In 2002, my sister was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was taking a huge toll on her, and cancer runs rampant in my family, and no one has survived it, so we were very scared for her. My mom came over to our apartment one day, and we got onto the subject of my sister's chemo treatments, and she started crying and said Dad came to her. She said that he just held my mom and said, "Don't worry about Pooh Bear, she'll be okay." My mom started saying it was bad, and he interrupted it and said, "She'll be okay, she's strong and has strong family around her. She'll be okay, I promise." And he was right. Despite it being a bad situation, the following year my sister's cancer was in remission and has not come back since. She's the first person in her family to beat any cancer. Dream 4, my dad checking in on mom for me. In January of 2025, my mom got really sick. We all live at home with her now, and she was coughing really bad, had chest pains, and her chest was actually swollen. This hadn't happened to her before, and my mom was really stubborn, and I told her if she didn't get any better in 2 days, I was making her go to the hospital. We live in Oklahoma, and right now we are #1 for the flu, and the current strain is really bad for the elderly. My mom is 64, and she'd been getting sick more easily lately. The night I told her this, I had a dream where my dad and my mom were eating with me and were having a conversation that I can't remember, when suddenly my mom left the dream. My dad smiled, stood up, and said, "I have to go. I'm going to check on Mom." Of course, I was scared because I knew she was sick, and Dad just said, "Don't worry, I'm just going to check on her." And the dream ended. When I checked on Mom later, her coughing was much better, her chest pains were gone, and the swelling in her chest had almost completely gone down. I asked if she had a dream about Dad that night, and she said no, but her coughing finally stopped sometime that night and had relief for the first time in days. I'm not saying my dad healed her from beyond the grave, but I do think he checked on her. Those are all the dreams that we've had about my dad, and definitely believe that he is still in the house. We have his ashes here, and every once in a while, things happen. Lights flicker like crazy, and Mom will say, "Ken, are you being silly?" And then they'll flicker a couple of times and stop after she acknowledges him. When lights flicker or we hear random knocking, we just go, "Hey Dad," or "Ken." And we'll get a flicker or knock in response, and then it'll stop. We always say hi to his ashes when we pass as well. It's nice to know that he's still around, and I miss him with my whole heart. Thank you for reading this email. I understand it could have just been my head or my heart messing with me, thinking my dad is giving messages, but my dad always said that he'd visit if he could, and I just don't believe it's anything other than him. Much love. So this was wholesome compared to the nightmares that we normally read on this channel. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm so sorry to hear about your dad's passing, but I'm glad to know that he's still with you. I'm glad to hear about your sister's recovery as well. My granddad would visit me a lot in my dreams after his passing, and he would also visit my grandma and my dad as well, and a bunch of other members of our family. But yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that this was something that's really nice for you going on, and I hope nothing more than the best for you and your family. Story 3. Hey there, I wanted to send in my paranormal stories for so long, but I figured I'd go ahead and give it a shot. Every house I've ever lived in has been haunted, or so my family believes it to be. I've always had a very strong tie to the spiritual side of things, and it's a running joke at this point within my family that I bring ghosts wherever I go. I have a dozen stories from over the years, but the most prominent ones occurred in the house that I lived in when I was born, and the one that I'm currently living in now, so I'd like to tell you a few from each. I apologize in advance if this is a bit long-winded. My parents were very, very young, 20 and 21, when I was born, so they wanted to move out on their own and start their own family. Because they were so young though, they couldn't afford very much and ended up moving into a small trailer in a not so nice area. My parents didn't know this until right before we moved out, but I think that it's important to tell first. The last person to live in the house was a 30-something-year-old man who had gotten 2 women pregnant at the same time. Instead of facing the consequences, he decided to self-delete in the kitchen of the house. A terrible end for anybody at all. When they found him, his cat was found sitting on top of his chest, which will be relevant again in my later stories. This one would eat me. I'll refer to each story in the form of incidents 1, 2, 3, etc. Incident 1 occurred over the span of a few weeks. I'm not fully sure about the layout of the house, as I was far too young to remember, at almost 1 year old. But the important thing to know was that the couch had a window directly to the left of it. My dad remembers sitting there, and with the most uneasy feeling of being watched day after day. He told me that he had never felt that before, an uneasy feeling of dread. One day, he can't shake this feeling, so in a moment of heightened emotion, he rips the blinds up. Sitting there, not 3 inches from his face, is a cat on the other side of the window ledge, staring him down with the most deadpan, stare-down face. You have cats, so I'm sure you get what I mean. My dad jumped, and the cat didn't move. He slammed the blinds back down and went outside. By the time he got to the round of the house, the cat was gone. He says that he never sat on that side of the couch again. Incident 2 is the story that I'm most excited to tell because it was what freaks me out the most. I have an older cousin, we'll call her Marie, who is 3 years older than I am. At the time of the story, I was just under 1 year old, making her almost 4. For context, her and my other cousins refer to my mom as Aunt Becky, for reasons I don't quite know. My mom was sitting on the couch while we ran around the house giggling and playing, like kids do. All of a sudden, Marie stops at the entrance to the kitchen, dead cold and dead silent. She starts crying and frantically freaking out. My mom gets up and goes to her, asking what's wrong, what happened. Crying, she says, "I didn't do it, Aunt Becky, I didn't do it." My mom is confused, thinking she broke something and is scared of getting in trouble. My cousin is now pointing as she says, "I didn't do it, Aunt Becky. There's blood everywhere. There's nothing in the kitchen," and my mom says that her stomach stank. She scooped both of us up and took us to her sister's house until my dad got off from work. There were many, many other events in this house, But this was one of the catalysts that pushed my parents to move, and these are the two scariest stories in my opinion. My mom is intuitive like I am, and I trust her intuition. Some kind of negative energy was in that house. The house we live in now doesn't give me or my mother a bad feeling like that one had, but there are so many other stories that I can recall firsthand. I feel that it's important to mention that my house is about 5 miles away from a large historic Native American fort and an old settlement. Dude. I'm sitting here in the living room, and we have a big window at the front of our apartment, and I think it was last night, Morgan and I were in here, and I was sitting on the couch facing the window, and I just saw what looked like flashlights to be shining at the window, and I'm sitting here now, and just this bright beam of light just like flashed, and like our neighbors aren't home or anything like that, and like there's nowhere from the street that faces our house, so I don't know where this light came from, but I'm gonna make sure there's no one trying to break into our house, and I'll be right back. I have no idea what that was. Which may make it prone to this weird activity. Mine and my siblings' rooms are down the stretch of a long hallway. Mine was at the end of the hall. My brother and sister shared a room across from the bedroom. Me and my sister now share the bigger room as she has gotten older, but that isn't too important. I get the strongest negative feeling from my old room, and I still do. It has a large walk-in closet with one of those overhead pull light bulbs, eerie in and of itself. Anyway, I was unpacking all of my clothes into a tall, heavy wooden dresser. As I turned my back on the dresser and grabbed another box, I heard a huge bang. And when I whipped my head around, all of the drawers were suddenly way open, and the dresser started to tip forward from the weight. I rushed over to steady it, pushing all of them back in. Though that's not necessarily spooky, I can't explain why this would have happened, as all of the drawers were previously closed, really freaking me out at the time. One incident that occurs a lot is a sighting of a small black shadow in my living room. We all assume that this is a child's presence, as it is only about 4 feet tall. From where my parents' room is, they can see a portion of the living room and a corner of the couch from their doors open. One specific incident with the shadow figure happened around midnight to my father. He works late hours, so by the time he gets home, we were all in bed asleep already. He's basically alone in the house and just now getting to bed, when he sees a small shadow over the corner of the couch. The figure ducks quickly. My dad assumes this is my little brother, as he is the same height, and decides to ignore it so he doesn't have to play into my brother's prank. He sees it again peek over the side and duck back down quickly. Because it is so late, he gets up to tell my brother to get in bed. He comes around the couch and doesn't see him, so he checks his room. My brother is dead asleep, snoring and drooling. Freaked out, my dad heads back to bed, not seeing anything else at the rest of the night. Since then, my dad keeps the door closed when he goes to bed. That is probably all for my major stories, but there is something that has been happening a lot lately that I would like your opinion on. I'm home alone with my brother a lot due to my sister and parents both being away for softball tournaments. He usually sticks in his room, the back room now, and I'm usually in the kitchen or in the dining room doing something crafty. I don't know if this helps, but my laundry room is right next to the back door and connects to my living room as well. At least once a week now, I'll be sitting on my couch or at my dining room table when I hear my mother call my name from the back of the laundry room. She is never home when this happens, and the laundry room light is always off. I don't know how to describe it, but something is always off about the voice and echoes more often than it should in the tiny room space. I've been ignoring it, but I wanted to know your opinion on what else I could be able to do. Oh God. Oh, thank you for reading all of this if you did. I love your videos so much, and tell your kitties I said hi. I just wanted to be a mimic. Oh God. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't want to immediately jump and say that that's a mimic, but it could be. There's a few different kinds of things that it could be. It could just be a spirit that's trying to impersonate your mom. It could be a mimic. The best thing that I would recommend doing is ignoring it. First of all, I mean, here's the thing. In any case, if this would just be like some sort of normal spirit, best case scenario, it's just trying to play a prank on you. So ignore it. And if you want to get rid of it, cleanse your space. There's plenty of different ways that you can do that. Definitely let us know if there's anything else that's happened with this creature, and we can give maybe like a bit more of a detailed description of how we would handle this. But the best thing that I can recommend at this moment is just cleanse your space using maybe black salt or smoke or something like that. Oh God, I'm down here by myself. It's 8 o'clock at night and it's pitch black outside, and now I'm terrified. So thanks for that. Well, that is going to go ahead and wrap us up for today's video, reading your terrifying tales. Again, if you have any stories you'd like us to tell on the channel, check out the description for the email below where you can send it. Definitely check out our podcast, The Tree Stared Back. There's going to be a link in the description for that as well. There's a video up right now, and there's going to be another one up Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.